Hello and welcome to Develop Your A-Level Teaching for 2022 to 2023. My name is Sally Yarrow and I'm the CEO and Executive Head Teacher of the Green School Trust, overseeing the Green School for Girls and the Green School for Boys. And I've been asked to talk to you about the exam results for the summer of 2022 and what we can learn from them. Before I begin, I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Ranjit, the head teacher at Heston School, for providing much of the data and information for this talk. I'm also going to now turn my camera off so that you don't have to see me all the time, and instead you can concentrate on the slides. So what can we learn about the results with regards to the summer of 2022? Well, firstly, the context was very, very unusual. Year 13 had never, ever had public exams before. Their Year 11 GCSEs were, of course, Centre Assessed Grades, or CAGs as they're known, so they'd never taken any public exams, and some of them did suffer from anxiety and mental health. Also, there were quite a number of staff who had also never taught two public exams before, particularly younger teachers, early career teachers, NQTs, when they were NQT in 2020, had never taught to public exams, even in their third year of teaching, so very new for them too. Unusually, advanced information was provided for those public exams, and teachers were allowed and enabled to adapt what they had taught already if needed. The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, was the cause of all this, causing a lot of educational disruption, illness and absence, both for staff and students, since March 2020. So this had been going on a long time and was taking its toll on people. So this really was a very unusual year. And because of this, Ofqual had decided they wanted to try and get it right in terms of the outcomes for students, balancing the very high results from 2021 to the pre-pandemic results of 2019 and ensuring that the results sat somewhere in the middle. And what we're going to look at over the next few slides is if that actually was the case. So you can see here for the A-level grades in all subjects between 2018 and 2022 that there is a rise in the curve in all grade levels from A star and C or above, where we start at a lower base in 2018 and 2019, and then it rises in 2020, and in the higher grades it rises up again in 2021, but then comes down for 2022. This is also true of the A grades or above between 2019 and 2022 across all subjects. There wasn't a single subject where this did not apply. If you look at that chart there on the left, the pink circles are the 2022 results, and to the right of them, the green circles are the 2021, which are higher, and the blue circles, the 2019 results to the left of them, which were lower. Some more lower than others, but nevertheless, the pink circles, the 2022 results, sitting in between 21 green and 2019 blue. And although there are some variations, overall, this was true across the subjects at all grade boundaries, with the green being the 2022 and much less than the 2021 results at each grade level, starting at A star here, going down to E's here, in these subjects, all showing a similar pattern. And on the left there on that slide, you can see that whether we were academies or free schools or comprehensives or the independent sector, the pattern still applies, with the 2019 results being much lower than the 2021 results, and the 22 results sitting there as pink circles in the middle. And of course, no surprise then that in every region of the country, it was also the same, from the northeast up here, all the way down and across to the southwest. Those pink circles of 2022 sit somewhere in the middle between the results of 2019 and 2021. And we know that the aspiration is to bring things back in line to 2019 or pre-pandemic for the 2023 results. Now, these block graphs here show where we are as a borough versus national, and the dark red blocks, the bars, are the London Borough of Hounslow results, and the orange bars are the national results. Now, you can see that the red are always lower, particularly at A star here. For 2022 is no different to previous years. And the A star to A here, there's still a little bit of a gap between the borough results and the national results. At A star to B, it's a little bit less, but look at it in 2019, it's a bit more, but similar pattern. And in 2021 and 2022, it's beginning to level off a little bit, A star to C, but it's still under national. So whereas at GCSE, traditionally, Hounslow have had above national for their results, for A-level, we're still not above national, particularly at those higher grades. And so it still remains a bit of a challenge for us as to how we really get those that gap reduced. Now, this chart here is taken from the 2019 results, and it's looking at our schools in the London Borough of Hounslow, and this is about average point score and value added. So the column on the left there, the average point score, and on the right, the value added. And the purpose of this is really to show that just looking at attainment, so just looking at those bar graphs that we've just seen and the other pieces of data on the other slides, doesn't tell us quite enough about how we are doing. The average point scores here range from sort of medium to high, but what the interesting figure is the value added. And there's no correlation necessarily between the higher average point score and the value added score. And for us as educators, we need to be thinking about the value that we're adding to our students' outcomes, not just the actual raw attainment that they get. Because if they're expected to get an A star, then it's great that they get an A star, but have we really added value to their experience, to how high that A star is, and to the experience and the outcomes of all our other students as well? So that's our challenge, ensuring that our value added in progress is as high as it can be. And there are many ways to do that, and this is the thing that we have to think about. And in essence, I believe that we just need to know our students and know about their challenges and how we can help them. So know thyself, know thyself. Let's look at our results. Let's do deep analysis on the papers in our subjects and question level analysis, really looking for the areas where the students struggle. Let's keep an eye on our progress scores throughout the year, and let's not just focus on attainment. let's ensure we keep an eye on those misconceptions and let's just bring them to the fore straight away in our teaching. Of course, we need to know our students, not just as learners, but also in the round, because if they're suffering or dealing with challenges and other things outside of schools, we need to keep that in mind and put in extra scaffolding and support perhaps for them if needed. And we need to understand their barriers to learning. When we do our question level analysis and our paper analysis and our progress analysis, we need to also be thinking about our curriculum. Have we got it in the right order? Are we sequencing correctly to enable our students to retrieve information from the past and apply it to the present? How do we teach? Are we thinking about our pedagogy? Is it the most effective way of teaching a particular topic? And of course, continuous professional development and learning, why you're here now, is critical. We do need to be open to new ideas. We need to have a go at implementing them. We need to reflect, and then we need to refine them for our own contexts. So that's just an introduction to the session for today. I'm now going to hand over to Graham from Chiswick to go through in a little more detail how we can prepare for 2023. Thank you.
Hello and welcome once again to your first Develop Your A-Level teaching session of this year. My name is Graham McNamara and I am Deputy Head Teacher at Chiswick School. The purpose of this keynote is to look at some of the key teaching and learning principles that we have embedded at Chiswick School that we feel have had a tremendous impact upon our A-Level results this year. We hope that is useful for you, and please feel free to get in contact if there is any element of it that you would like to discuss further. We start by looking at 4 impact strands for teachers that we feel have the highest leverage. The first one is lesson structure, then looking at resources, archives and independent study, preparation for PPEs and parental contact. When we look at our lesson structure, we have a 5-part lesson which encompasses many parts of Rosenshine's principles. We start our lessons, every lesson, by doing a do now task. This is generally 5 key knowledge questions that range from the previous lessons to the previous schemes of learning, and allow students to be in contact with content more frequently, allowing for spaced retrieval and allowing students to remember more for longer. We then start the lesson off and look at the activation stage. The activation stage of the lesson is looking at direct instruction. So giving the students that key content knowledge that they need in small steps, providing very clear models and concrete examples and scaffolds to allow for differentiation for different learners that we have in our room. A very key area is making sure that we have constant AFL and checking for understanding. Now, we use many different forms of this, but key parts of our lesson include hinge questions, which are really key for checking for misunderstanding. This would be 4 answers that are plausible in a multiple choice question. One of them is inevitably the correct answer, but the other 3 could be correct if there was a misconception embedded. This is really important for the teacher to be able to spot these misconceptions very quickly and address them before we're getting students to move on to independent practice. When we're moving on to independent practice in the demonstration phase of the lesson, generally at the start, perhaps in year 12 or at the start of a new scheme of learning, we guide student practice more. So we provide model answers, provide structure for them. And then as we move through the year or move through the scheme of learning, that becomes less guided and more independent. And that can be looking at essay style questions, or it can be looking at exam style questions. And it's really a chance for the students to prove the learning in which they have been taking part in the first, perhaps half an hour of the lesson. It's really important to mention that one key element of our lesson structure is that we refrain from asking students to take notes in lessons. We want them to be listening actively in lessons to that direct instruction of the key knowledge and being able to very quickly respond to our checks of understanding and then put that into practice in the lessons. The time that we have with students is quite limited, and we feel that when we go on to this later, that students should be able to compile their notes after the lesson if everything that is gone through in the lesson is provided for them in a very sequential and secure place that they can access at any point. We then end the lesson with what we call a RAG summary, which is looking at a plenary. And the whole point about this is making sure that we are concrete, that when students are leaving the lesson, that they have achieved the purpose of that lesson. So it's looking at obtaining a high success rate. This would be usually in the form of a big question that is answered that fully encompasses the lesson. We're then looking at our resources archive, our independent study, and this has been a key driver in making the students independent learners, but still being guided. So each class has a Google Classroom page, and this provides students with a Google Classroom Drive where after every lesson our teachers will upload the resources from that lesson in a very organized manner in terms of the scheme of learning that they are studying at that point, and it perhaps could be lesson 1, lesson 2. So everything is there for students, so when it comes to the end of the year or end of topic tests or mid-year tests, they are able to go back and look at lessons that they perhaps had in September and look at the key knowledge that was delivered, and also be able to pick and choose which lessons they feel that they need more support with. Really helps with if students have missed a lesson, and it allows them to be able to catch up very easily as everything is in one organized place. We also use Google Classroom to set our independent study work or our homework. This is really useful to set as a task, and we can set deadlines on there, and it's quite useful to be able to see the rate of submission, which students are handing it in late because they've passed that deadline, and everything gets piled into a resource folder as well for the teacher. So it is stored all in one place, and there is ease in terms of going through student work rather than fishing through our emails or for pieces of paper that we may have been handed for those. And the next stage is looking at preparation for PPEs. Our students in year 12 and 13 sit 2 rounds of PPEs per year, and we take this really seriously with them. And we want them to be the most prepared going into these, so it gives them the most real practice of a terminal exam setting as possible. But prior to PPEs, we give out the exam timetable at least a month before to students and parents so that they can plan their revision. And we also give them an exam guidance document. This document is a shared Google Sheet that heads of department and subject teachers will have put together. And it details in chronological order of looking at the assessments, the number of papers, the length of the paper, and the topics that are going to be assessed on each paper, as well as an array of guided revision resources from YouTube channels to websites that offer notes or flashcards, or whether it is guidance towards certain lessons that they have covered that are stored on their Google Classroom Drive. This is really key, and it allows students to get into good practice for preparing for exams. So looking at the sequence of the exams that are presented before them and being able to organize their resources or what resources are available to them and map out their study for that period of exams. And our last bit we're looking at is to try and make sure that our parental contact is as high as possible. We do have, a lot of parental contact when students are in year 7 to 11. And sometimes there is that assumption when we move into sixth form, yes, there is that need to be more independent, but also they needed to be guided and parents still need to be informed as much as possible. So we add parents and carers to our Google Classroom classes as a guardian, and they can only see what concerns their child on there. So what has been set for them, if they have handed in their homework on time or if it's been late. And when it's returned to them, they can see the comments and the scores on that homework too. As part of a wider whole school approach for raising achievement, teachers also contribute to commenting on the areas of strength and concern of our students who have lowest value added after our PPE series. Senior staff then use these comments and meet with the student and parent and formalize a action plan. And that action plan is shared between the teachers, the parent, and the student as a Google document. And teachers are tagged in any actions that apply to their subject, so they know perhaps that this student has been asked to complete perhaps extra exam questions each week. The teacher will provide them, and the teacher can comment on whether they have been completed or not, and the parent can see that also. So those are some key areas that we use for our sixth form teaching and learning strategy. As I said, we found them to be quite impactful and preparing students as best they could for exams. And as we move into an exam season that we haven't seen for a few years, we feel that giving students the most support is one of our highest priorities. As we move on to next and how we prepare ourselves for the session that we're going to have today, one key aspect of the session today is looking at what we've learned from the previous exam series. So what are our next steps to ensure we have our best possible outcomes for our year 13s this year and in coming then our year 12s as we progress? So there are a few questions that we need to pose here, and it's looking at why is an exam analysis important? And it allows us to identify areas of the curriculum that have actually been implemented quite effectively and students have scored quite well on them. And equally, it allows us to identify parts of our curriculum that may not have been implemented as well and can allow us to have conversations about our curriculum development. Did we teach that in the right place? Did we give that enough time in our curriculum? Are the lessons that we're providing for that, are they setting students up to have a higher success rate, or the highest success rate really, in the exam? It also allows us to look at how our cohort has compared to similar schools. I know a lot of the exam boards provide that analysis, and also compared to national. It also allows us to look at, are we addressing the social disadvantage gap? And are students who are socially disadvantaged or are on our pupil premium indicator, are they making the same progress as our non-PP students? And that's a really important aspect to look at and look at what support some of those students may need. When we're looking at papers, and I know that's been part of the task today, is to look at some recalled papers. What is the purpose of looking at this? It allows us to spot common errors that students have made or poor exam technique and bring that and highlight that to our future exam cohorts so they can see students not showing their full workings and how that has allowed them to lose marks, students forgetting units, students not using the correct structure or perhaps not planning enough, and also not really analysing the question well enough or answering parts of the question but then not others. It allows us to compare the papers to the examination report, so reading them alongside the examination report to really see if 50% of students made a common error, is that something that's occurring in our papers and something that we can address with our classes. One, through our conversations in lesson, but also do we need to factor that into our curriculum development and explicitly teach that at a point in our curriculum? How accurate was our own internal marking? So looking at what we would award a question and what has actually been awarded is a very useful piece of exercise, and a very useful piece of exercise as a department to collaborate on and comment, and also just to look at yourself in your marking as well. And it provides that guide for future moderation within the department, looking at what the exam board are looking for when the papers have come back, compared to what perhaps our interpretation of the mark scheme has been. We're also then looking at then what the value to teaching and learning is of looking at these recalled papers and how we can utilize them. So they can be used as exemplar answers to share with students, calling back a student's paper who's done exceptionally well and showing students why they've done exceptionally well is very beneficial. It also provides an opportunity to share clear examples, but then non-examples. So perhaps students who have not done as well, looking at why that was and why that was not necessarily answering the question. It also provides unseen answers for students to analyse and as part of a lesson, giving them an answered question to look at from a previous year, and asking the students of what mark would we award this, so they can get a better understanding of how the marking in their subject takes place. So they mark it, give their feedback on what mark they would give it, and then it's shared with them what mark that would actually achieve and why. It also allows the teacher to mention or address common misconceptions student might have about answering an exam paper, especially in terms of poor exam practice, and really exposing the common pitfalls in their subject. So for instance, it may be that is the last question on a paper, and it's very clear that the student who answered it had ran out of time. So it's looking at timing in a paper, but also you could be looking at an essay question where there's not much of a plan, and that's really then evident when you're going through the answer that it wasn't planned very well. And we're then looking at what we need to do to get ready for this summer exam season. We need to be making sure the students are remembering more for longer. There isn't any content that is going to be removed, and for some of these students, this is quite a lot of content, more content than they would have had to have dealt with for their experience of GCSEs. They need enough timed practice of unseen questions as much as possible. We know that there's a limitation around this in terms of the amount of papers that are locked or unseen, and that is something that we need to really push on with students to ensure that we're not just learning from mark schemes, and that we are really testing ourselves to be able to apply knowledge rather than regurgitate mark schemes. And provide students with key exam techniques, timing, looking at exam structure for certain questions, and making sure that they're really clear on that. And then what are the challenges with this current cohort? Well, we know that there's still going to be gaps in knowledge due to absences. And a key solution that we have with that is making sure that our resource archive for each subject is completely up to date. So to any student who has had absence, whether they're in year 13 and it was in March of year 12, that content is there for them to go over in that resource bank. Less exam practice in full exam conditions is a key challenge for this year group. They had a varying experience at GCSE when looking at the tag grades that were given, and that varied from school to school depending on their policy. So students have had less exam practice in those conditions. So it's really important for our PPE series that we give them a robust exam experience in terms of their access arrangements that they're entitled to, making sure that we're assessing for access arrangements, especially in year 12. If people are finding that students are running out of time, or if students have high exam anxiety, which is our next point, is looking at what mitigations can we make in terms of access arrangements for those students. Compiling that evidence in year 12 is so key, so that it's in place for year 13 and also can be practiced, so that their first time experiencing that exam access arrangement isn't in the real exam. And then another area of this is all right, exam anxiety with just the pressures of year 13 and the real high stakes end of year terminal exams have on their well-being, and also looking at how we can mitigate this in a way. We found that running some exam prep and dealing with exam anxiety workshops really helps with this. There are many providers that are open to helping schools with this. I'm happy to pass those on. And these will run sessions before your mocks. So perhaps for us, they were ran in November and then in February, and then they will come back and run them again in May before the real exams. We opened this up to students and they could come if they wished. And we knew which students would benefit most from that. And they reported that they really enjoyed them, gave them a lot of practical techniques that they could use in the build up to exams, but also on the day of an exam. And then the quality of exam marking is a challenge. It was reported quite heavily in the media that a lot of non-teachers were marking papers, or university students, or even students who had, or even teachers who had not had experience in the subject in which they were marking. And this is a challenge. And perhaps, we can get into a debate around that in terms of looking at the fairness around the payment, and the also the inconsistency of the payment, and the disorganization of the payment this year, which hasn't helped, and which has perhaps turned more teachers who were experienced in their subjects from marking. And the best way that we can probably combat that is to implore our colleagues to sign up to mark as much as they can. It's great subject CPD. It's really, really great in terms of getting an understanding of how the exam process works from behind that scenes, looking at how those mark schemes are developed, and finding those common pitfalls that students are making as well. So I really hope you enjoy your session today. As I said, please feel free to get in contact if you want to discuss any of this further. And I really hope you enjoy your session. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.